Hi everyone. So today I want to speak about abandonment. But first, out of the Dictionary of Psychology, there are two definitions. The one is the abandoned self, which refers to no longer attempting to model oneself after an ideal self. The second is abandonment reaction, which is a feeling of emotional deprivation, loss of support, and loneliness experienced by children deserted or neglected by one or both parents, also experienced by adults who have lost a loved one on whom they depended. Now, realistically, abandonment isn't completely covered by that. From my perspective, please remember this is my opinion. I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and everything I say can and will be held against me in a court of law. Kidding. Everything I say is my opinion from my own experience, from my own observations of what's what from my perspective. So I look at abandonment and I don't see abandonment as necessarily the removal of one or other parent or the neglect by one or other parent or the loss of a loved one. I don't see it as that. Yes, that does play a factor. And I am well aware that growing up as children, we were neglected by our so-called parents. So that plays a part in the formation of my perception and my opinion around abandonment. And there are a couple of things that stand out to me on abandonment. And one of the events that I distinctly remember was my sister and I coming home after visiting a friend, and the house was locked up. Now, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. There were 4 children. My father traveled a lot. My father happened to be in town, so somebody should have been at home. And my sister and I got home at the time we were supposed to get home, because otherwise we'd get punished, because it's bad to disobey. And the entire house was locked. There was no note. There was no neighbor to say, this is what's happened. We, knowing better, didn't go anywhere, because if you disobeyed, you got punished. So we sat outside. It was winter. We sat outside until 7 or 8 in the evening, I'm not quite sure. We weren't dressed for the occasion, and we had absolutely no idea where our brothers or our parents were. All we knew was we couldn't get into the house, and heaven help us if we went to a friend or a neighbor, because we would get punished. And eventually the parents arrived with both brothers in tow. And what had happened is the one brother had injured himself. And the parents had gone and fetched the injured brother and the other brother, and then taken them off to the hospital for emergency treatment for the broken limb. So they had the time to fetch one of the other brothers and take that person with them. but they didn't have the time to write a note to say, this is what's happened, we'll be back as soon as we can. Now, we weren't toddlers. We could read and write. In those days, we didn't have cellular phones. So, no, there was no way of calling or contacting. But that is abandonment. When you're a child and you don't understand why you have been locked out, why there is no communication, nothing, that is abandonment. Now, we bear in mind it comes from neglect anyway. So there's a continual pattern of neglect, of not noticing, of not realizing when there's an issue. And we were young. I don't think we were teenagers yet. So being locked out was a big deal. It was a big deal to my sister and I. And it's over 40 years later, and I still remember that. 40 years later. So abandonment plays a huge role in the development of one's sense of safety and security. You sort of think, well, as you get older, you get over that type of thing. And one would think you do. But do you? You get to a point where, and I'm in that stage, where I expect people to leave. I expect people to leave. That is the long and short of it. I don't expect anyone to stay. Because why would they? Why would they? So, abandonment is it's a huge issue. And it starts in the formative years. It starts when you're a child. And it's probably connected to the protector who doesn't protect. Those people are supposed to realize that we're leaving two young girls outside for however long, because everybody knows that there is no timeline on getting emergency care. It could take an hour, it could take 10 hours, depending on the severity of what had happened. One would think that the protector would make an effort to let the children know. And it wasn't as if the mother couldn't contact us. She knew where we were, because heaven help us if she didn't. So there was no excuse for it. There was no reasonable, valid excuse to leave us locked outside. And when they came back, there was no apology. There was no acknowledgement of the fact that we left our two young daughters sitting outside the house. No by your leave or thank you. We left them for hours, and it was indeed hours, without any indication as to what may or may not have happened. There was no apology. There was no care. They actually thought it was funny. So, is that abandonment? Well, if I think of this definition, no. no, that's not abandonment, that's neglect. But wait, neglect is abandonment as well. You know, you neglect the emotional needs of somebody, you're abandoning them, aren't you? So maybe it is abandonment. But what else? Because there's more. There's got to be more. There's got to be more from an abandonment perspective. So what else is there? What else creates abandonment issues? Well, I suppose we've got the whole neglect thing down pat, because neglect in and of itself is an abandonment crisis. Then we have the Dictionary of Psychology definition, which shows the loss of one or both parents. And that could be by divorce or splitting up or separation or work issues or ultimately death. And that type of abandonment is a different type of abandonment, but it'll fall under the total umbrella. And it'll depend on how the parent who is leaving behaves towards the children, how the children perceive it. And one would have to look at a traveling parent, the absentee parent. So the parents don't split up, but one or other parent is never there. The protector is never there. They come and go. So every time they arrive, you are validated that they're back. And every time they leave, you are abandoned. So there's that to consider. Would that be classified as abandonment? I don't know. I do know that the father traveled a lot. He was a traveling salesperson. I also know that at some point I disliked him to such a large extent that I dreaded him coming back and couldn't wait for him to leave. So was it abandonment? I don't know. Was my reaction due to abandonment? Could be. Probably not. It was probably due to all the other gnarly things he used to do. But I imagine in a normal, happy, loving family that there would be a measure of abandonment that is seen in that, especially when the traveling parent truly loves their child. That child would develop issues of being abandoned. And the abandonment pattern doesn't end. You see, as I've said, I wait for people to leave. I don't expect anybody to stay. Nobody. I really don't. I am so used to being left and indeed leaving. You see, as a child, my father, as a traveling person, would move all of us depending on how long he had to be in a specific place for. So we were uprooted from South Africa to Germany. I was a toddler then. And in Germany, I went to school. I had friends. And then he moved back to South Africa again. So I got used to leaving people behind and ultimately being left behind. I was shifted from one school to the next. I think in total I attended 7 different schools. And that wasn't because of my behavior. That wasn't because I was special needs or difficult or got expelled or had to be moved due to myself being bad, I suppose. I went to 7 different schools because my father traveled and we moved a lot. And every time I was forced to move, I lost whatever friendships I had. Because in those days, we didn't have cell phones, mobile phones. We weren't allowed to use the fixed telephone because it was a waste of money. So the only communication we could maintain was by letter and the odd telephone call that you would sneak in. So I got used to leaving people, and I got used to people forgetting me. Literally forgetting me. The last move happened when we moved from Port Elizabeth to Johannesburg. And I was taken out of school, a school that I'd been in consistently for a number of years. I had friends. I had friends who were neighbors. I had a network. And suddenly in standard 9 or grade 11, I think it is now, I was moved into a school deemed acceptable by the parents. It was a all-girls school, so I'd gone from a co-ed school to an all-girls school. And I had to suddenly adjust to strangers again. And my school friends, my networks, were left behind. And I didn't fit in. I didn't fit in. My sister fit in even less, but I certainly didn't fit in. Because, to be honest, I find females quite bitchy and mean. And sometimes almost vacuous. So, yes, I made 1 or 2 friends, but being used to leaving, I left school and I left. I haven't stayed in touch because, quite honestly, we didn't have much in common. And it was a matter of either abandoning myself, abandoning my own connections, or being abandoned by them because they just didn't suit for whatever reason. And you don't think anything of it. You sort of carry on and get a job and make friends at work because that's where you are now. And then you leave that job and you go to another job and you make friends at the new job and you leave the others behind. And it's a pattern. It becomes a never-ending pattern where there is no genuine permanent connection. I know people who have friends that they have been friends with since they were in junior school. I've never had that. So being left, being abandoned, is a theme in my life. I have had boyfriends leave. I've had friends leave. I have ultimately, the parents did the whole abandonment routine. And funnily enough, even the death of the parents didn't impact me as much as one would expect. But let's bear in mind, these are parents who were rather neglectful. This is a mother who didn't know that her young daughter had started menstruating and had been for 2 years before she caught me. So the neglect was obvious. And I eventually got to the point where I looked at everything and I thought, I'm going to be on my own forever. I'm never going to have a partner who loves me. I will be single for the rest of my life. And ultimately, I won't ever have anyone who has my back, in the sense of the word that I'm thinking of, which is a relationship concept. Happy, loving, I've got your back, you got my back, and we'll be together forever. I'd reached that point. And then I met my ex. And suddenly I had somebody who was making plans for the future. Somebody who wanted to marry me. We actually got engaged. He had dreams. And we had dreams. And we had plans. He also has a minor child. And she was included in the dreams, in the plans. The technical hiccup was that he had a contract starting overseas. And at that stage, I had 15 cats in my care. So me going overseas was not a realistic possibility. But the plans were made. I was squatting in that hideous brother's house because of him bankrupting me. And part of the plans were that I would find a property, and between my ex and I, we would rent or buy a property that was big enough for his minor child to live in, and I would take care of his minor child until he was back in South Africa. And for 18 months, he didn't financially support me. For 18 months, he didn't mention me renting a property. And at some point, he woke up in the morning and the man who loved me the night before was gone. I got an alien. His time overseas the contract was nearing end, and he'd stated that he would not stay in my hideous brother's property. So I, on limited budget, found a place that was big enough for him and his daughter, and me, obviously. And I moved out from where I was staying 7 days before he came back to South Africa. Why did he leave me? Well, I don't actually know. I can tell you what he said. He told me he wasn't in love with me anymore. He told me he thought I was the one, but he was mistaken. He told me that I smoke in the bedroom and that doesn't work for him. He told me he didn't see a future with me. But he'd stopped discussing a future with me. He'd stopped making any form of plans with me. He had, however, made it perfectly clear that he was coming back to South Africa to me, and he refused to move into the hideous brother's property. So he left me zero choice. And then he abandoned me. He abandoned me and said, "I'll be back." And when he said he'll be back, he looked at me and he said, "I don't know why you're acting as if you'll never see me again. I will be back." Well, needless to say, it is more than 2 years. He isn't and hasn't been back. I have not seen him. He has hardly communicated, in spite of me trying to stay in touch. So, yes, I have abandonment issues. I was abandoned by the only person who I thought loved me. I don't know if he did. I don't know why he left me. I do know that he left me in a giant pit. I know he turned and walked away and hasn't looked back, in spite of everything that I did, in spite of me being willing and happy to help him raise his daughter. So, why do I think he left me? Well, I think he left me because I'm not enough. I'm not pretty. I'm not physically attractive. I clearly don't have any form of personality. And I was probably just a convenient layover. I was probably just somebody that was there while he was in a particularly oppressive country. I was probably the one person who didn't judge him, the one person who stood by him and cared for him and loved him. And I wasn't enough. He didn't see any value in me. He didn't recognize all that I may or may not offer him. He didn't discuss anything with me. You know, he came back from overseas and went to visit his daughter in another province and didn't invite me. He didn't invite me. He would be with me for 2 weeks, and then he would go and stay in accommodations in another province for 2 weeks. And the 2 weeks that he was away, I didn't exist. I literally didn't exist. He went from a man who contacted me to say good morning every single morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. A man who spoke to me on the telephone for hours, who messaged me throughout the day, to somebody who loved me. He went from that to never looking back, to not remembering me. He forgot who I am. He forgot I might have value. And then I look and I think, well, gosh, not even your own parents loved you, so what did you expect? What did you expect? What exactly were you hoping for? That magically somebody would give a shit about you? That magically you would have some worth? Well, I didn't have worth. I didn't have worth. I have been thrown away by so many people. But the biggest throwaway was when the man I thought loved me, the man I thought wanted to spend the rest of his life with me, walked away and said he'd be back. And he won't. So, yes, abandonment is real. And, sorry, I needed to pull myself towards myself because it still hurts a lot. So yes, abandonment is real. And it's a pattern that will continue throughout your life. If you don't get the help you need, if you don't speak to the qualified professionals and tell them the truth, stop protecting your protector. If your protector is a douchebag, tell the professionals your protector is a douchebag. Stop protecting the protector. Stop protecting the family name, the all-important family reputation. Stop doing it. Stop protecting your abuser. Tell the truth so that you don't wake up one day and you're nearing 60 and you're thinking, what the actual fuck has happened? Because Am I likely to let anyone into my heart again? No. No, I'm not. It doesn't matter how much I kid myself that I will. I think I learned the ultimate lesson in abandonment. I ended up not being able to financially support myself because I had moved when I couldn't afford it, because I had been told that the man I loved refused to move into the accommodations that I was forced to stay in because I wasn't important enough. I wasn't valuable enough. I wasn't even valuable enough to get an answer as to why. So I am left thinking, it's because I suck. And I have sucked my whole life because everybody leaves. So now, even when I do make a human connection, I don't expect anything. I have one very beautiful friend who will probably speak to me once he's seen this, and will speak to me and try and console me and try and reassure me that he won't leave. But they all do. They all do. Sorry. They all leave. History has shown me that they all leave. The worst part of all of this is that one of the psychologists who was counseling me started harping on about me smoking cigarettes. And I decided he was an idiot and I left. And I never went back. And what he said to me is something that makes perfect sense now. What he said to me is, you smoke because they've never let you down. They've never left. Cigarettes have never left. They've never let you down. And barring the government ban on smoking during the entire COVID debacle, where government turned me into a criminal because I had to buy illegal cigarettes, cigarettes never left. And the more unhappy I become, the more, I don't know, alone, lost I am, the more I smoke cigarettes. And the worst part of it is that the only thing that has never left is killing me. It is literally killing me. But it won't abandon me. And maybe, if I'm successful in this journey, I will be able to abandon cigarettes. And I won't be abandoned by humans anymore. I won't hold my breath. I won't dream of that day. And I won't expect it to happen. But maybe it will. And maybe I'll start believing when somebody says, I'm not leaving you. And maybe they won't. And I won't wait for them to. So if you've been raised as neglected, if you've been abandoned, please, get help and tell the truth. Don't protect your abuser. Don't protect those who are supposed to protect you. Get the help so that you don't wake up one day and the only person who you ever really loved and who ever really showed they loved you leaves. Don't wait until it's too late. Anyway, enough of that. I hope you have a great day now.